But great. Welcome everybody to our webinar today on collections care MacGyver style. My name is Eileen Corcoran. I'm the Director of Service and Outreach for the Vermont Historical Society and one of the directors for the Collections Care and Conservation Alliance. And so we're super excited to have some familiar faces and some new faces with us today. So just a few quick notes, tech-wise before we get going, of course, your controls for Zoom are down at the bottom. We do request that while the presenters are presenting, that you do keep yourself on mute, and generally speaking, feel free to turn off your video. We will be collecting questions in the chat and sort of holding all questions till all of the presenters have gone. So please feel free to start asking as we go, but we will hopefully have plenty of time for those questions along the way. And I'm excited today to host this webinar, a version of which was given a couple years ago at our League of Local Historical Societies and Museums conference. So that was an in-person chance. And so I love the fact that we're getting to bring this to the virtual realm and expand it to a wider audience, because we've got some great people here today with lots of wonderful experience and information to share on this. And so I'm going to introduce our presenters before we start. First up is Erica Donnis. Erica has more than 25 years of experience working as a curator, archivist, and collections consultant in cultural heritage and academic institutions. Throughout her career, she has frequently been responsible for collections care on a shoestring budget. She is currently part of a team of Congressional Papers archivists at the University of Vermont, preparing Senator Patrick Leahy's papers for public access. A lifelong Vermonter, Erica holds a Master's of Arts in Early American Culture from the Winter Third Program and the University of Delaware. Next up is Michele Pagan, is a textile conservator in private practice living in East Dorset, Vermont. A native Vermonter, she has been practicing and still learning conservation techniques since the 1980s. Some of you may remember Michele from her work as the director of the Collections Care Program for VMGA in the 1990s. Today, in addition to preserving history one textile at a time, she is co-coordinator of the Search for Samplers and a presenter at Bennington Museum's Institute. And our third presenter today is Darlene Bialowski, a contract museum registrar and a fine and decorative arts appraiser. She's been in the cultural heritage preservation field for more than 25 years. She was the sole registrar for a 5-museum association and handled rotating exhibits for 2 Smith & Wesson facilities. She has a BA in anthropology with an emphasis on archaeology and associates in the administration of criminal justice, both degrees conferred simultaneously from the American University in Washington, D.C. Darlene also is a certified paralegal achieved through the University of New Hampshire, a graduate of the Winter Third Institute, and an accredited member of the Appraisers Association of America. With that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Darlene to give a quick intro about CCCA. Darlene.
Thank you, Eileen. And so wonderful to see so many familiar faces and names and to see some institutions joining us from New Hampshire, where I am. If you are new to joining us, the Collections Care and Conservation Alliance, or the CCCA, as we fondly refer to it, is a Vermont nonprofit that 13 co-founders established in 2019, and many of us are on this call. We are professionals from fields such as archives, conservation, and objects-based collections care management. Our mission is threefold: to be a resource for networking, professional development, educational opportunities, and to support our colleagues who are in the upper New England area, in small museums, historical societies, archives, and other repositories. Our second line of mission is to help and assist those volunteers in the same venues who may or may not have some type of professional support background. And the third is to be a resource for the general public. So you will see us at functions such as the Norwich Historical Society Antique Fair in September, and next month we'll be at the Bennington Museum Appraisal Fair. Our website, and I will kindly ask Eileen to drop that into the chat, has a lot of information about past and upcoming events, about board members. There's a membership directory. There's also a Get Involved tab, which I'll ask you to visit. And you'll find two categories of membership if you would care to join us. There's criteria lined out, and there are some great benefits and a great networking opportunities and great educational programs such as this. And if anyone wishes just to support the work that this fully volunteer organization does, we'll kindly invite you to become a friend. Just a reminder, next Thursday, we have an event called Conversations with Colleagues, and that is generally a professional affiliate event, but because when we decided to go virtual with our educational programs, we added on this event to follow the week after any of our programs. So next Thursday from 12 to 1, the panelists will be available and you can ask additional questions. If you're only able to listen to this as a recording, you can come with fresh questions. And it's an opportunity also for presenters to maybe bring up an additional point that they might want to make, that they may have thought of after the actual webinar. So this webinar is the beginning of the 2024 season. And again, if you're in the Bennington area, stop by and see us at the Bennington Museum on April. And I'll be there with Michele and Carolyn Friesa, who's another board member and a paper conservator in Bellows Falls, Vermont. And please check our website for other happenings. Michele will unexpectedly need to leave today by 3. So as Eileen mentioned, please put your questions into the chat function. We'll collect them and Michele will be available next week to answer those questions for you. And now I will turn hosting back to Eileen.
Great. Thank you so much, Darlene. And again, as mentioned, we are recording this. So for the folks who are here, you will get that link, and then everybody who registered will also get it to be able to watch it later on. And so again, I think this is a wonderful topic that we're all having to deal with, and for most organizations, any ways in which we can scrimp and save and get more out of our collections care budgets, the better. So I believe I'm going to turn it over to Erica to share her screen and get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I wanted to give a special welcome to those of you who may be joining us from outside the New England region. We were so pleased to see that this webinar attracted the attention from folks all over the US. So welcome for sure. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and then get started to kick us off. Okay, let me get back to the beginning of this slideshow. Pardon me for just a moment. There we go. Okay, so this afternoon we'll be sharing a whole bunch of budget-friendly tips and tricks that we have gathered and used ourselves, as well as we'll be sharing out some other things that we have learned from other colleagues in the field. And so just again, there are 3 presenters this afternoon: myself, Darlene Bialowski, and Michele Pagan. And just as an introduction, definitely our philosophy as a group and our philosophy for this webinar is to be thinking about collections care in terms of a good, better, best framework. In a perfect world, we would all be able to reach the best category, the platinum category of collections care. But we just wanted to let you know that our philosophy is, and we hope that you can use this as a takeaway, that our philosophy is that the good is just fine. That meets best practices in the field. And in some ways, in fact, can be a better strategy for your organization overall, because it allows you to stretch those dollars and those staff and volunteer resources further to reach more components of your collections. So we also wanted to give a shout out to the Hive Mind. As I mentioned, these tips and tricks are drawn from our own work, as well as the broader museum, archives, and conservation and libraries fields. And many of the things that we'll be talking about are things that we learned from other folks in the field. So definitely we're all grateful for the generosity of the hive mind. Some broader themes that we'll be discussing this afternoon include ways that you can use regular household items for collections care projects, ways that you can do it yourself instead of buying an expensive off-the-shelf conservation quality product, maybe using what's available that you see in a website for a conservation company to use as a model for something that you can make yourself or something that you can adapt to stretch your dollars further. Also, a lot of what we do is think about ways to use up our scraps. So it may be that you're buying a product for one purpose, but you have some leftover pieces, and you can use those leftover pieces for other things. You may also be in a situation of being able to mix and match regular household items with kind of the off-the-shelf conservation supplies that are out there. And then, of course, building on the theme of the generosity of our community, we encourage you to think about ways that you can work on collections care projects and share your resources further by joining forces with your neighbors. So as Eileen mentioned, I am an archivist. I'm currently employed by the University of Vermont. I'm also an independent collections consultant, and over my career, I've had the pleasure of working in a variety of museum, archive, and library settings, both as an employee and as a consultant. And I'll be drawing from experiences from a number of places that I've worked or consulted for in my part of the presentation today. All right, so I'm just going to launch into kind of a lightning talk with some different ideas to throw at you. So first up is, how can you use regular copy paper instead of what's marketed as a conservation quality product? And so the first tip I want to give you is that most copy paper on the market today is indeed acid-free. Some of it will say that right on the packaging. Others, you can Google the product information and get more details online. So for example, the project I'm working on now at the University of Vermont, we just looked at the standard Staples copy paper that our organization orders for the printer and discovered that it is actually acid-free. So we've been using that for a variety of purposes. So one example is on the left. You can see that we're using sheets of copy paper as kind of a paper wrapper inside a folder of records. So this could apply in situations where you're removing a staple or a paper clip or a binder clip from contents within a folder and you need some way to group them together. Just fold a sheet of copy paper in half and create like a little paper wrapper. You can also use this method for isolating newspaper clippings and full issues of newspapers that are touching other items so that the acid in the newsprint doesn't leach onto the materials around it. You can also use this as a low budget way to protect print photographs as well. So I actually have stopped, for the most part, buying plastic photo sleeves and am using copy paper instead. So just regular copy paper, super thin, doesn't add much to the bulk within the folder. It also serves as a great barrier for protecting the surface of the print itself, as well as many of you have probably run into a situation with photographic prints where maybe they have remnants of tape on the back. And so any adhesive will be, there will be a barrier there provided by the copy paper against the next item in the folder, whether that's another photograph or a piece of paper or something else. So great tool and something that's very low cost. The photograph on the right, you can see an example of how at UVM we're using sheets of copy paper as flags So we are working with students, and we're having students do some of the physical processing tasks after an archivist has gone through a box of materials. So these are flags that we put in to indicate to the students where we need their assistance with buffering contents, buffering newspaper, for example, taking correspondence out of envelopes, or we have a whole list of purposes that these slips of paper serve. I could also see using these for call slips if you're an organization that uses call slips. Or, for example, if you have researchers who come in and need to provide instructions because they're requesting a scan of something, you can use strips of paper like this and have them write their notes in pencil on the top of the slip, put it right in the page or the section of the folder where they want the scanning to happen, and it will provide you the information that you need. Okay, moving on to another way that you can use a regular household item instead of, for example, a official photo sleeve. Many types of these print protectors, these print sleeves, which you can buy from Staples and many other office supply companies, are made from material that is conservation quality. So up on the screen here, you'll see some tips about what to look for in the contents of the plastic. So there are several different kinds of quote unquote good plastics to look for. And you can often Google the product information or look at the details of the product listing online and verify what kind of plastic the item is made from and whether or not it's going to meet conservation standards. So you want plastics that don't have PCV or vinyl in them. And ideally, they would indicate that they've passed the photograph activity test. If you encounter these sheet protectors in your collections already existing in place, you want to be on the lookout for a yellowed plastic surface or something that kind of smells a little bit like vinyl, like a vinyl shower curtain, for example. Those are plastics. That's an indication that the sheet protector there is not going to meet conservation standards and should be replaced. You'll also want to avoid a sheet protector or a similar application like a photo album that has any kind of adhesive to it. Okay, next up, I've got a bunch of slides about how to use cardboard sheets and scraps. And so here I'm talking about acid-free cardboard or corrugated board, and you can buy this from a number of different suppliers. You may also be in a situation where some supplies that you're purchasing from a vendor actually come with scraps of acid-free cardboard as a protectant, as intended to be for shipping purposes. And I've actually saved a lot of those scraps and reused them for other things because they are indeed acid-free. So for example, photo sleeves that I have purchased from some conservation vendors have come with little squares of acid-free cardboard scraps in the back of the pack to hold them together. Another example, I've purchased metal bookends several times from a library or archive supplier, and they've come packed with little squares of cardboard between them in the packing. And you'll see an example in a few minutes, another slide of where I've used those scraps. Also up on the screen is an image of a self-healing cutting mat. So if you're taking sheets of cardboard or repurposing scraps, you're going to probably want to have a cutting mat on hand. And this is one you can buy from a number of suppliers. You might be able to put out a call on Craigslist or among your neighbors or put a wish list on your website. And maybe you'll find someone who, for example, is a quilter or a crafter who has a cutting mat available that you could have. So here's one example of how I have been using cardboard sheets that are cut down in strips. So on the right, you can see two examples of some beautiful ready-made conservation supplies that are book slip cases. So we have the really fancy red one on the top, and then another example, which is kind of a pre-made with adjustable sizing. And so my poor man's edition of that is the, you can see in the photos on the left. So what I've basically done is created a cardboard wrapper and scored the fold lines on the inside so that the cardboard has a nice crisp fold line. And then I've tied it together with some cotton twill tape. So I'm using conservation quality supplies here, but I'm doing it in a way that stretches my budget. Another example, you can buy these ready-made box spacers from a number of different archival suppliers or conservation suppliers, and they're really great. I highly recommend them in order to hold the contents of a box in place if it's not full. However, you can make them yourself and do it much more cheaply by taking a sheet of cardboard and cutting it in a strip and then putting in the score lines yourself. So on the left is an example of a homemade box spacer. Another example of how I've been using cardboard scraps, you can kind of see kind of sandwiched in the middle photograph here. So this is 3 different images of the process of building a homemade DIY exhibition mount. So I started with the product on the left, this self-adhesive photo prop, which you can buy from a number of different office supply and art vendors. And you can see it's got a strip of sticky tape already attached, and it has a way to fold out so that the item you're displaying will be propped upright. So in the center, you can see that I took a scrap of acid-free cardboard and cut it to the size of my brochure and stuck that to the mount so that my actual collections item is not in contact with anything that is not conservation quality and is not in direct contact with any adhesive. And in the photo on the right, you can see the finished product. So I basically also adapted the inert plastic strips that you can buy that hold the pages of a book open. That's what they're often marketed for. And in this case, I'm using them to gently hold that brochure onto the mount that I created. Okay, continuing in the line of exhibition ideas. So on the left here, we have a beautiful book exhibition pillow, and versions of this are marketed by a number of different archival and conservation supplier companies. And they are they're great to use and certainly would work really well if you had a platinum size budget. But for my purposes, what I did basically was to create a version of this. I got the idea from seeing this on the website, created a version of this just with a sheet of unbleached cotton muslin that I've wrapped around some quilt batting. So this is kind of the prop in progress here on the right so that you can see kind of what the construction of it looks like. So a note about quilt batting or fiberfill. There are a number of different versions of this fiberfill on the market. Some of them are conservation quality, some are less so. And so you'll want to think through carefully which version would apply best to your situation, particularly if you have an object that you're displaying that would be more susceptible to a non or less archival or conservation quality fiberfill product. And also maybe another consideration is how long this item would be on display in this setting. So for me, in my work, what I would spend more money on something that I felt was going to be, that I predicted was going to be on a more long-term display, and with something, an object that I was concerned about its susceptibility to contact with a lesser quality quilt batting or fiberfill product. Cleaning supplies, some more great examples of how you can use regular household items for museum or conservation quality cleaning. So in the center and on the right, a couple different examples of products that I use for dusting. And so these are just regular children's toothbrushes and regular paintbrushes that you buy at the hardware store. So you can buy them in a variety of sizes and of course, softnesses or coarseness. And so you want to think about your application, what's going to work best for you. But you don't have to spend a ton of money on products that you're going to use for dusting purposes. So a good example of this, a child's toothbrush works really well if you're in a setting where you have historic furnishings and you've got lots of nooks and crannies that collect dust. You can get the child's toothbrush the slightest bit damp and use that to just run along the moldings or inside those creases and corners and get that dust out of there. And best practice would be to, while you're running your toothbrush along, you'll have the nozzle of your vacuum, your museum quality vacuum right there to suck up that dust immediately. On the left, a couple of different recommended cleaning products. Ivory dish detergent. Ivory is recommended by the conservation field because it's been tested and confirmed to have conservation quality ingredients. There may be other dish detergents or laundry detergents out there that also meet those specifications, but this is the one that I know about where the company has provided the full product list in order to be tested. You'll also notice the spray bottle I don't know if you can read the writing that's on the display bottle, but this is a tip that I got from a conservator for cleaning glass on frameworks of art, as well as scanner glass. So this is 1 teaspoon of isopropyl alcohol in distilled water. So it creates a very, very light cleaning solution, which works really great for glass products. And so you may know this already, but just a word of caution to be careful to spray your paper towel or your cloth rather than the glass itself to make sure that you don't inadvertently use too much liquid and run into a situation where it's going to cause damage. Okay, switching gears a little bit, thinking more about storage equipment, continuing with the kind of the lightning talk phase here. Wire shelving. A lot of folks that I know have really successfully used wire shelving, which is often designed for the restaurant industry or warehouse setting for inexpensive collections shelving. As you may know, you buy these units with a number of shelves that come with them. You can often buy extra shelves if you want to space them closer together. And there's an opportunity when you're assembling to decide what the shelving heights that are going to work best in your situation are. So the example on the right is, of course, the platinum version of compact shelving. For those of us who don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend on compact shelving, wire shelving units on wheels can provide a really good substitute. So you can push them close together when you don't need access to your materials, and then pull them apart when you need to go in and get something specific. So just a word of caution, however, you'll need to be careful not to overload them with weight because they can become unwieldy and difficult to manage depending on how much weight you have on those units. So you want to think that through and think about what's going to work best for your situation. So I've used these wire shelving units spaced for document cartons. I've used them spaced a little bit closer together to hold oversized textile boxes, oversized print boxes. I've actually adapted a unit like this as a garment rack. So I took out the middle shelves and just had the ones on the top and the bottom for stability. And the hooks of my clothes hangers actually hooked really nicely onto the wire of that top rack. And then I was able to make a muslin dust cover that went over the whole unit. So that worked really great for some garments that I had on hangers. One other example way that you can use wire shelving racks is on the left is an example of how a wire shelving rack has been adapted for frameworks of art storage. So you can see this is a two-tiered rack. And this particular unit is marketed for a warehouse setting where there are a variety of flat packed cardboard boxes that need to be shelved until a box is ready to be packed up for shipment. So I'm storing my smaller frameworks of art on the top shelf and my larger ones on the bottom shelf. There are these divider units that came with this shelving unit, and I've actually padded out the dividers as well as the end posts with foam pipe insulation, and that's attached with zip ties. Because my frameworks of art here are all in a framing package, I'm less concerned about making sure that everything that I'm using for storage here is acid-free or otherwise conservation quality, because my original prints, maps, other framed artwork is not going to be in direct contact with the pipe insulation or the cardboard sheets that I'm using in between each item here on the shelves. You'll also notice that there is a red circle in the center of that shelving unit there. That's just pointing out another household product that I have reused for storage, which is just cardboard frame corners. You can get them in bulk from a number of different suppliers, including art houses and framing supply companies. I bet you if you go to your local frame shop, they might have some they'd be willing to give you if you just needed a small amount. They work really great for protecting the corners of those frames when things are in storage. The other photos here are just another example of a different way to store frameworks of art, particularly if you have oversized items. And so for me, in this purpose, I had this really large oil portrait. It didn't fit on my wire shelving rack. So what I did was I took some 2x4s, cut them into lengths and painted them so that I sealed off any wood from direct content with collections, and then stapled some conservation quality foam on top. So the frame is sitting on these 2x4 supports in a way that's padding it out. And you'll notice the 2x4s stick out from the edge of the frame as well. So it's providing a little extra security against something bumping up against the frame. And then the image on the right, you can see that I've also put a large sheet of cardboard over the top of my portrait to protect that exposed canvas a little bit. Okay, moving on to some more oversized materials. If you've ever searched for acid-free tubes, cardboard tubes that you might be using for storing rolled items, you might have had a heart attack because they're very expensive. And this is a great way to adapt a regular cardboard mailing tube that is not acid-free for conservation quality storage. So there's 3 different progress shots here up on the screen. On the left, you can see an example with the cardboard tube on the inside, covered with a small strip of Melanex, which previously has been known as Mylar, so you may be familiar with that term as well. So what I've done is I've used double-sided tape, strips of double-sided tape, to tape the Melanex to the cardboard, taking care that the tape itself, the adhesive, is fully covered by the Melanex layer. In the center, you can see midstream in the process, over the Melanex, I rolled the tube onto a strip of acid-free tissue, and then I rolled my banner on top of that. On the right, you can see the finished product, which has another layer of acid-free tissue, and then is tied up with some cotton twill tape. I've also seen folks do another layer of Melanex as a protectant over the top, over that second layer of tissue. And that would be awesome if you had the supplies and the money for that as well. Just a shot of a similar strategy here, showing how these rolls can be stored in your facility. And I will put a pin in this because I know Darlene's going to talk a lot more about how to maximize your storage for rolled items. So here's one example, and then Darlene will pick up this thread a little bit later. Okay, moving on to think about ways that you can flatten items on site and do so in a safe manner. So I'm going to show you a couple of different methods that have worked really well for me. Last year, I did this really large project that went through over 500 architectural plans, a large collection of architectural plans. They came to me rolled. And so I wanted to flatten them out as much as possible to fit in the flat files that I had. So here's one example. This idea has been around for a while. So you can see the theory on the left, the description, and then an example of it in process on the right in my setting. So in this case, I used a commercial Rubbermaid trash can with a tight fitting lid as my outer container. And then I put my rolled items into a smaller office size trash can that fits inside the Rubbermaid trash can. And so you want to make sure that your plans fit below the surface of the lid, because that lid is going to go on tightly to lock in the humidity. And so this works really well for plans that are not extremely tall. So you want to check that out. So one method for creating the humidity in the trash can is to do as described in the resource on the left, is actually to fill the trash can with a small amount of hot water on the bottom. What I did in my situation was actually to soak strips of blotting paper with that hot water, because then I didn't have any actual liquid in the trash can, which for me was an added layer of security that I wasn't going to inadvertently damage any of my plans. So what we're doing here is creating a much more an environment with a much higher relative humidity for a short period of time that allows those paper fibers to relax. So typically what I do is I set this up so that first thing in the morning when I first arrived at work, I'm getting the blotting paper wet, putting the plans in the trash can and closing the lid. And I'm leaving them in there for up to a full day, up to 8 hours. So at the end of the day, I'm taking the plans out and flattening them from there. And so usually that time frame is enough to at least flatten the paper fibers enough so they will relax and can be safely rolled out and flattened. They may still have some residual curl to them, but as long as you're putting them in a folder or in a flat file or a box, they should be good to go after that. So you want to leave your flattened materials out for a couple of days with some weights on the top before putting them in their permanent storage spot. So I mentioned that some plans don't necessarily fit inside the Rubbermaid trash can because they're too tall. And here's the solution that I came up with for those plans. So you're seeing the top view of what I call the Great British Baking Show proving method of humidification. So I've basically taken a plastic box. It's made out of corrugated plastic. You can buy boxes like this from a number of different conservation suppliers, or you could also repurpose a plastic bin. For example, one that's designed and sold for storing wrapping paper would be good. So I put my plans inside the bin or the box. I put them on a table, and then I've put the bin or the box inside and a very large trash bag. And then around the edges of the bin or the box, I've put strips of blotting paper that's been soaked in hot water, and then closed up the edge of the trash bag and left that to sit again for multiple hours until the paper fibers have absorbed some of that humidity. So I don't know how visible it is, but on the right side of this image, you can see something brown. That's a ruler, a plastic ruler that I use to prop open the trash bag on the inside to make sure I got good circulation between the blotting paper and the items in the bin, so that the trash bag wasn't sitting directly on top of the bin. Okay, so a couple more ideas here. We've got ways that you can transport oversized flat items. Another issue that a lot of us have is, how can we get our oversized plans and maps and other things from point A to point B after they've been flattened? So here are a couple of ideas. So you can repurpose carts that are on the market for storing or for transporting flat items. So a little bit more information about the idea that's shown on the right. So you can see that this cart was actually designed for a warehouse setting, but if you take the bins away, you have that nice tilted upper level, which you could use to transport your plans if you had a sheet of cardboard in the back to hold them stiff at an angle. Okay, so last idea here is what to do with some of your oversized items, oversized three-dimensional objects that have kind of wonky shapes. And I've actually found that records cartons work really well for a variety of things. Sometimes the lids fit, sometimes they don't, but that's okay. Because my shelving is predominantly designed for records cartons, this can be a good strategy to use the shelving that I have without needing a special configuration. So here's a couple examples of stoneware jars that have been placed inside a records carton that is cushioned with acid-free foam. This product, the brand name is called Valera. And you can see on the left that the lid of the box is padded out on the underside, so that when the lid goes on, the brown box, there's some padding there against the top of that jar. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Michele.
Hey, everybody. Very glad to have everybody joining us today from near and far. Why don't we just get started, Erica? I think you're in charge of the slides, right? Okay, very good. Yeah, let's start with the book written by my friend and colleague, Don Williams. Don is a retired furniture conservator now, spent his entire career at the Smithsonian. And he wrote this book. He's like, I think Don Williams' middle name is MacGyver. He's exactly like that TV character that some of us still remember, MacGyver on TV, right? Anyway, Don wrote this book especially for everyday people, non-professionals, volunteers that, are lovely little historical societies, and just family genealogists, So I highly recommend this book. This is for you. If you're just a volunteer trying to do it all at your historical society, I highly recommend this book. I'm sure it's still available. It was written in 2005, and I'm sure you can buy it. I know you can buy it online and probably at any major bookstore, just about anywhere. Let's go ahead with the next slide, Erica, please. So I'm showing you here, this is a picture of my textile lab. And the thing I want you to notice most, I think, is that it's really important for your examination room. Now, I'm showing you this because it's my laboratory room, my workroom, but I hope all of you have some space that you can call your incoming examination space. It's really important that you not just take your most recent donation and maybe put a label on it and stick it up on a shelf and not look at it again until somebody asks to look at it. I was called to a historical society just a couple years ago who did exactly that. They called me up and wanted me to come in to look at this suit, a man's suit who had been a tailor for many years in their town. They just took it in, stuck it on the shelf, and then called me in to look at it. Years later, we opened up the box and it was totally moth-eaten. It just about had to be thrown away. So that's my point in showing you this slide here. I try to keep my workroom very clean. I would emphasize you want to keep your table covering materials white. Why white? So that you can see bits and pieces of insect parts, dead insects that might fall out of corrugated boxes that have arrived in your examination room. If things are wet and dyes might be bleeding, you want to see that. You want to see that. You want to see dyes bleeding if that's what's happening on your white table coverings. I want you to notice that all of my white materials below the table are all folded. They're nice and clean, and I can grab them instantly in the middle of doing my work. I have my heavy rolls of paper, as you can see sort of in the back there in the corner of the room. Those are my heavy paper materials. I have acid-free tissue there. I have glassine, a roll of glassine, and I have a roll of Tyvek there. So that's how, because I'm only just the one person, I can't handle these heavy things by myself. So when we set up this workroom, I had my husband mount those up on those tubular rods for me. And the other thing, the final thing I want to say is this table surface is made of padded materials. It's a padded mattress pad that I bought at my local thrift shop, and then a queen size sheet over that. And the whole table surface is 39 inches tall. And that makes it so much easier to work for me and probably for you and your volunteers too. It's 39 inches tall, as opposed to, say, my dining room table, where I'm sitting right now at my dining room table. It's only 29 inches tall because we sit, don't we, on our dining room table. But if we're going to be standing, you don't want to be bent over onto a 29-inch tall table. So if you can at all, if at all possible, have your these are those adjustable rack kind of shelving units that Erica was just talking about, and they're adjustable. And so I was able to adjust. These are just two hollow core doors that I picked up at, some architectural salvage place somewhere, and then covered them with padded materials. Next. Next slide, Erica. Yeah, okay, so here's I just pulled back the sheet to show you that this is just a queen size mattress pad that fit perfectly over two hollow core doors set side by side. I change the sheet on top very often. I leave the mattress pad there almost all the time and always use white. And oh, and by the way, not all thrift shops are created equal. If you perchance don't really have a high opinion of your own thrift shop in your town, try another thrift shop in another town, because the people who live in a town are the ones who donate to that thrift shop, right? And so some thrift shops have better stuff in their thrift shops than other ones do. So just be aware of that. If you're driving through a different town where you don't live, and you see the thrift shop is open, stop in. You may be very surprised at the different quality of goods in somebody else's thrift shop. Next. Okay, so this again is just another look down below, all the stuff I have stored underneath my table surface. And you can see, as I said, all of my materials are folded up, folded edge forward, so I can grab them easily. And anything that's not white, I have in bins, plastic polyethylene bins, so that things like mice and spiders cannot get to them. So that's really important. If you're going to lay in a supply of textiles that you need, please make sure to have them covered properly. Next. Now this is probably the highest end product that I'm going to mention, but having a microscope is great for helping you make sure your labels are correct. Now you may say, what in the world is the connection between having a microscope and writing labels? A microscope enables you to properly identify the cotton, linen, wool, or silk fabrics that you probably have in all of your vintage or antique costume collections. This is the true story now. I went and visited a local historical society just a few years ago, and they had a textile framed, and next to it was a spinning wheel, and the label said, this is a linen wool piece of fabric. The flax was raised on the donor's farm nearby, and this is the spinning wheel that probably was used to weave this fabric. And I looked at it, being a textile specialist that I am, I thought to myself, I don't think so. That does not look like flax, does not look like linen to me. Sure enough, the curator was kind enough to let me take a piece. I went back another day. He unframed the textile for me. I took a piece with me to the local high school. Now remember that. There may be local schools that can help you, believe it or not, with collections management at your historical society. So anyway, it turned out I was right. Using the microscope at the high school, I was able to confirm that textile that I saw was indeed cotton. And then if that was a cotton wool piece of fabric in the frame at the Historical Society, that was definitely the wrong spinning wheel that was next to it also. So that's what I mean. The microscope can be your best friend to make sure you know what you're talking about so that your labels will be correct. Now, this one I happened to get very cheap because I found it on Craigslist. And it turned out the woman who was just about going to bring it to the local dump lived not even a mile away from me around the corner. And we didn't know each other, but she had advertised, she had done blood analysis with this tool. She's some kind of nutrition independent consultant, and she was using this to do blood analysis. So bear that in mind, that if you have a school nearby, if you have a local community college nearby or a university nearby, they are always trying to upgrade their materials. And so it's not a bad idea to make sure that they know about you, and that, you know, or if somebody wants to donate a microscope to your collection, take it and ask if they would mind if you actually put the microscope to use rather than just put it on the shelf. Okay, so that's my suggestion for having a microscope in your workshop. Next, please. The other major tool that I would suggest you have is a sewing machine. These days, since we've stopped teaching our young women how to sew, right? Almost, we're just about the only generation that remembers what home ec used to be. We're just about the last generation that learned how to use a sewing machine on a regular basis. You can just about get a sewing machine off the side of the road anymore. They're almost free. And with this kind of tool at your disposal, you can make a lot of the things that Erica was just talking about, and I'll show you right here. For example, this padded kind of little padded snake, I'm going to call it. This is a piece of padding stuffed with polyester made from what's called surgical stockinette tubing. Now, this is just off the shelf from a medical supply place. So if you have a medical supply store anywhere, you just stuff this with whatever kind of material you need. to use as a padding material, to use to stabilize if you have a glass collection or a pottery collection, or just as a, you can make this any size or shape that you need. You can use your sewing machine to construct quilted kinds of items like this. This is from a catalog, and I kept it as an example of a kind of object cover that is being sold in one of the archival catalogs today. But you can make this kind of thing. This is just quilting. Again, go back to your thrift shop and keep your eye out for mattress pads, and bedspreads very often have a quilted top. Buy those kinds of textiles and then cut them apart and make them into the sizes and shapes you need. And here's the world premiere. I want you to see. I just made this last night. I was analyzing 3 samplers that had come into my workroom. They had been flood damaged, and I needed to photograph them. And I needed to lift up the corner of one of the damaged samplers and take a picture. And I don't know about you, but in order to get a decent picture, I have to use 2 hands, right? So that the picture doesn't shake and get blurry. So I needed a 3rd hand. So I invented this just last night. So this is, it's filled with dried beans. So it has some weight to it. Unlike this, which is stuffed with polyester fiberfill, this one is stuffed with dried beans. So it has a little weight to it. And so I turned back the corner of the sampler that I needed to photograph, and I set this down on the corner of the sampler, and I used my other 2 hands to take the photo that I need. And this takes no stitching at all, no sewing of any kind. I just took a white glove and filled it up with beans. You could use rice, you could use glass beads, you can use lead shot. You know, I wouldn't use sand, however, because the sand obviously would sift out of here. Okay, so you've seen the world, the world premiere of having an extra hand when you need it. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and this is what you do. If you're lucky, you have a group of volunteers that you can train up. All it takes is 1. Start with 1. Anyway, this is a view of the workroom with the volunteers working on their sewing machines down at the Northampton Historical Society in Massachusetts. I can't say enough good things about volunteers like this. Out in Hawaii at the Bishop Museum, they were called CMAs, Conservation Management Assistants, and they were worth their weight in gold. So I wish you well, and you're lucky that many retirees these days are about my age, and they really do have this kind of skill with sewing machines. So see if you can develop your own group of conservation management assistants. Next, please. Okay, this is a set of samples that my paper conservator colleague friend recommended. These are the kind of materials that you want to build up a stash of in case you have an emergency. And most of these items are available at, you don't have to order them from an archival supply place. Most of these items you can get at your grocery store, like butcher paper, or your local hardware store, all right? Almost always try to get them in white. As I mentioned, talking about my workroom table, because you want to see, especially in the case of a wet water emergency, you want to see if there are dyes that are running. And so you want your materials to be white so that you can see that happening, all right? So a lot of these materials, like terry cloth towels, you can get at your local thrift shop. Polyester batting, you get at a place like Joann Fabrics. Gardening fabric, paper towels, you can get at your local hardware store. Polytex is a specialty kind of fabric, and you really don't need it. Other things can do the same job. But butcher paper is at your grocery store. Window screen and nylon netting is from Joann Fabrics. Polyethylene, though, plastic sheeting is at your hardware store. So just little by little, start building up a supply of these so that they can work as table coverings if you need them to be. They can help you carry damaged items out of a wet situation and lay them out on the ground or lay them out on the grass to dry. That's the purpose of having these materials on hand. Next, please. And these are just little samples that were from a card from one of the archival products, showing that these are the kind of materials that they will sell you, all right? So these are 100% linen or 100% cotton, muslin. Almost always you see white or, unbleached is what we call these. But you can pick these up very easily, like I said, at your thrift shop, local thrift shop, or if you want to buy them brand new at a place like Joann's or Michael's, you can buy them there and it'll be much less expensive for you. Next, please. Okay, this framed poster, by the way, is available from the Vermont State Archives. If you don't have one and would like one, it's a very basic and very beautiful kind of reminder for your group of volunteers of some very, very basic handling techniques that you want to get them used to practicing. But what I really want to talk about is in the lower left corner. That's your little temperature and RH meter. It actually looks like this. This is how big it is, or this is how small it is. Okay, next slide, please, Erica. This one that I bought in my hand, this was from Radio Shack. Oh, I bought this maybe 20, 25 years ago. But the point is, you can, Radio Shack, I don't think is even around anymore, but other places have them, of course. And they're not expensive, as you can see. This is what, like $25, something like that. So you could just go online and order these, and they run on a battery. And all of this is to say, you don't have to spend a ton of money to have a decent, environmentally controlled, or at least monitored storage space and workspace. You need to be careful. Once you get above 70 degrees Fahrenheit and 70% relative humidity, that's when mold and mildew is going to grow. All right, so remember that's a rough estimate now. 70 degrees temperature and 70% RH, relative humidity. Those are the numbers you want to remember. You want to monitor that. So in the summertime, you want to have your dehumidifier running to take the moisture out of the air. And in the wintertime, you want to plug in your humidifier to put more moisture into the air. Okay, so it's pretty basic. You don't have to be real smart to operate a little tool like this, and it's not expensive. So go for it. Next. Another little tool, very handy to have. If you're going to have a sewing machine, you want to have an ironing board and iron nearby also. If you're going to be making covers, as Erica was showing you those wire shelving units that she has, and she's hanging costumes up in them. Great idea, but don't forget, you definitely need a dust cover over the top of them. All right, so you want to have a nice looking storage space now, right? So you want your textiles to look good. And so you want them to be nicely stitched, having a sewing machine, and you want to have them nicely pressed using an ironing board and iron nearby, and a spray bottle to spritz the textiles as you're ironing them. Next. Make your own boxes. I think Erica already touched on this a little bit. Order in just a supply of acid-free corrugated board and go for it. Erica has shown you lots and lots of ways that she uses just plain pieces of cardboard. I'm showing you an example. This is the kind of boxing that I do for clients. This was a client who brought in a rather contemporaneous child's christening gown. And I know a lot of you have christening gowns in your museum and historical society collections. She wanted me just to do the monogramming that you can see at the bottom of the gown here. I had to add the new baby's monogram and date for it. And then I made her this box. And the box is made of double wall corrugated acid-free board. And there's a Mylar envelope on the outside. And there's a photograph of the item, of the dress in this case, that you slip into the Mylar envelope. And in your case, this is going to help you prevent unnecessary handling of your whatever kind of object you have. In this case, textile, obviously, is put a picture in make your own little Mylar envelope, tape it with double-sided tape to the outside of the box, put the accession number on the outside of the box, and you immediately know what's in every box, and it prevents you from having to sort through the boxes, trying to find exactly what it is you're looking for. Okay, next, please. And the last thing I want to mention is if you would like somebody to come on site, and help you develop a whole team of conservation management assistants, otherwise known as volunteers. Sign up with Eileen Corcoran at the Vermont Historical Society to have a mentor come on site and spend half a day with you, or a day, you know, whatever need be, to learn some of these things. If you think these are all great ideas, but you're feeling like, oh, I can't do that, I don't even know how to use a sewing machine, you know, have a mentor come and spend half a day with you and your volunteers, and you know, get your staff trained up, your volunteer staff trained up in that way. And if you're participating today from another state, I'm sure other state historical societies have a similar kind of thing. Mentors, professional mentors that will come on site and give the training that you need to help you implement these collections care ideas that we're showing today. Thank you. Good luck. Next, Erica.
Okay, thank you, Michele, so much. That was absolutely wonderful. And as Eileen had shared, my name is Darlene Bialowski, and I am a contract museum registrar. I've been in the field for many, many years, as well as a fine and decorative arts appraiser. That was added on the last number of 10, 12 years. As a contract museum registrar, I work with small institutions, small historical societies, small organizations that have some type of collection, as well as working with artists, as well as working with private collectors, and then larger establishments and larger institutions and private organizations. Next slide, please. So I'm going to build on what Michele and Erica have been sharing today, but I'm also going to be talking about the best practices and safety as a priority, because if we're going to be looking at collections care at MacGyver style, we have to remember we still have to be safe with ourselves and safe in handling objects. I have a slide of some online resources that Erica and I and Michele have pulled from, but there will also be a handout of resources and websites, as well as a handout for instructions of making your own custom weights. So be looking for that when Rachel sends out the link to the recording. In all cases, we have to think outside of the box to maximize space and how we're going to store things and utilize the space we have, because no one ever, ever, ever has sufficient space. And as both of my colleagues have demonstrated, take what you have, use your scraps, look for things in thrift stores and consignment shops and flea markets. Use what you've got so that you don't have to spend what little monies you may have on things such as what we've been talking about, and you use those funds for something later that is going to be special. And always keep your mind for practical thinking. How do you move things? How do you take care of things? How do you look at what you're planning? Next slide, please. So when we did, as Eileen said, when we did this presentation before, it was in a live setting, and I've also used this slide in live presentations. But since we are virtual, I will tell you what's wrong with this picture, because I won't be able to see a show of hands easily. So these are two individuals, sometimes called art handlers, sometimes called preparators, sometimes just called facilities guys, that are moving a framed work of art. Now, it's in a gallery setting. We have no idea if the gallery space is open, if that particular gallery is closed. It looks to me like there's a greater amount of daylight coming from the left, so that's probably an entrance, and maybe the guy is looking to see if there's anyone in the way. But ideally, what should happen is that the two of them should be carrying that painting, facing toward them, side by side, and going through a space, but have also already communicated where they're going, what hindrances there might be. Is there a door that needs to be propped open, or does someone have to hold it open? Is there a set of stairs? Are there curves in the hallway? Are there boxes to deal with? So on and so on. The next issue here is what they are physically wearing. The guy has a ball cap on. Should not have a ball cap on, but that ball cap is also has its visor facing forward. If he has to keep it on for some reason, that visor should be facing backward, because that is something that could damage whatever it is they might be carrying. On the woman on the right, we can see that she's wearing some type of belt. Belts generally have a belt buckle, which could be quite disastrous to whatever is being handled. So ideally, the belt buckle should not be there. Maybe the belt be removed, or as in his case on the left, the shirt is outside of the jeans, thus having some kind of barrier against the belt buckle. The last obvious to me issue in this image is that they both have things hanging off their belts and hanging out of their pockets. Tape measures, key fobs, all kinds of things. Those things should be wherever they are leaning to go. If it's a gallery space where you're going to move the painting to, or if it's storage, wherever, those tools should be in that place and not on their person, again, to prevent damage. Next slide, please. These are both images from professional mover websites, and you'd be amazed at some of the things that you see. And again, if we're going to be handling objects and putting them in our MacGyver style boxes, which we're making sure are stable, we don't want to handle things such as glass and china and crystal by any rim, and certainly not by one that is not just a straight rim. It's got a ruffle to it in this particular image. So you'd want to cradle the object more toward the middle with a bare hand so that there is some kind of contact, and then cup the bottom of the object as you place it into your box, which has been fitted out with some type of padding. The image on the right, I just recently found and threw in because it's got some multiple issues. MacGyver style collections care, you're setting up your own workspace and you want to make sure that it's cleaned and kept free of things. This individual is getting ready to pack and ship a very expensive vase, as you see standing there, and is quite tall. On his work table, he has two tape measures. One's plastic and one's metal. He is holding the vase with a piece of foam wrapped around it, but he is now overextending himself to reach for that tape dispenser that is yet on another work table. And pretty soon that overextension is going to be dangerous enough where he's going to accidentally tip over that vase and it's going to break. So case in point here, have your workspace clean and have everything that you need within a very reasonable arm's reach. Next slide, please. Three-dimensional objects, safety for yourself and safety for the object. If you are moving to maybe put onto a wonderful wire rack that Erica and Michele have shown you, I also have my library on some of those racks. Be sure that the object is stable, that there are no cracks that are visible, and don't handle it by the rim and don't handle it by any type of handle, but support it from the bottom base, whatever it might be. The most assured place where it's not going to cause any damage. With pieces of furniture such as chairs, don't pull the chair by the top of the back member, don't pull it by its arms, don't pull it by its legs. Make sure, again, you examine for condition and then move it by, most logically, the seat as well, as long as that is a stable seat. Next slide, please. And these images were put in here for also, again, handling. And I know someone just commented in the chat about how they were holding that picture frame. It was a bit unusual, but I thought I would just discuss that here. On the left, you see fine art shippers showing how, and in this case, it would be if you are moving a piece of paper, a work on art on paper, from one position to another within a few steps, or if you are turning the piece over. You do not want to use your thumb and your forefinger because that can cause an impression. What you want to do is a scissor movement. So you want to place that side of the paper between your forefinger and middle finger, causing a scissor effect to hold that paper into, and then gently move it. If you have a larger piece, a smaller piece and a more fragile piece, which I'll have another image of later, you move it by some bottom support of a mat board or piece of cardboard. On the right, you move stretched or frameworks facing you and always by the vertical members. Never pick up a frame, never pick up a mirror or anything by its top member because you will ruin the miters and cause the pieces to fall apart. Next slide, please. And this is an image of moving framed works, and I'm sure many of you know this, but for the benefit of our audience is always having individuals that are volunteers or maybe have come back into the fold of the profession or maybe just have never done this work before. When you are stacking framed works in storage, as you will see nicely done on the right-hand side, you want to put face-to-face or back-to-back. And always like-size pieces. You wouldn't want to necessarily put in the middle image with that smaller framed piece that she is now setting down with a face, against the face of a larger sized frame. So you always want to have like sizes to like sizes. Next slide, please. And we've talked about saving your scraps. So if you have scraps of foam, keep them in a tub somewhere. If you, we'll talk about carpet squares in a moment, but if you have carpet squares, it's the same thing. In both of these instances, you can see there's going to be some type of gallery setting, exhibition going up. If you have frameworks that are coming into a space to be organized in some fashion for the exhibition, you should not put that framed work flat on the floor. Erica had a sample of her oil against the wall, and she built her little pylons. In this case, you can use stacks of foam core if you have. And especially so in the right-hand image, you will see a beautiful decorative frame that's being placed on a cart to move to a greater distance. And there is a buildup of foam blocks underneath to protect the decorative elements of that frame. Next slide, please. Here we go with the carpet squares. They're my best friend. When I was the only registrar at the Springfield Museums in Springfield, Mass., which now is 5 museums, and I also handled the 2 exhibition sites at Smith & Wesson, we always had, it was suggested to me and highly encouraged, and my parting gift from him was a set of carpet squares from the lead preparator of the museum. And we would go to some of the facilities in town, and in cities, you can find places that go and lay carpet and install and come back usually with scraps. So we would go and we would talk to the installers and ask for scraps and ask if they could cut them to certain sizes. You'd only want certain types of carpet squares. You wouldn't want shag because that would hold dust and insects and dirt. You'd want a shorter pile and various backs, but most likely you would want rubber backs. We used to have the corners cut, rounded, and these are square. You can have whichever works best for you. And I would have stacks and stacks of different sizes to go for different jobs. I use these in my home still, and I use them when I go on site for appraisal projects or for contract projects. And as you can see in the upper left, someone is using a carpet square as just a padding underneath a chair to keep from impressions on the wood. But as a single person, sometimes working on a job, if you can find someone to help you lift up a piece of furniture to enough to slide a carpet square under, and you get them under the 4 legs or the 4 corners, you can easily manage a piece of case furniture by way of having carpet squares used as your buffer on the floor. I added these images in on the bottom because I just recently saw some people move furniture and then someone complained about a back going out. So I have no idea how heavy this chair might be, but you certainly wouldn't want to pick up something that is so decorative and has so many elements by yourself. So you'd want someone to handle you, but always start in a squatting position because that will save the muscles in your thighs, in your lower back, in your upper back, in your shoulders, and in your neck, and keep yourself safe and keep the object safe. On the right-hand side, we see a cart. And it does not mean that if you're moving things within your institution, you have to have a crew of preparators, a crew of art handlers. All you need are sensible ways to move things, MacGyver style. This is an inexpensive cart that you can sometimes find at big box stores like Home Depot, sometimes at lumber yards, and sometimes with the big box stores, and we've been sharing where to get things at various places. You can inquire with management as to whether there are any carts that are perhaps damaged or too small for what they need to generally move, and they've just got them shoved off to the side, or they're looking to send them back to headquarters to ship to another store, or they're even tossing them in the metal redemption bin. And these places will generally be good enough to gift them to you for free, or they may ask for a minimal amount. Nonetheless, again, building those relationships with your community and with your neighbors. Next slide, please. And these are 2 images of how to safely transport objects MacGyver style. So you have a box top, whether that is an acid-free box that you have and you're just borrowing the top, or whether it's the top from a case of paper or whatever it might be. The image on the left should really have a lining of foam within it, but it doesn't. However, that also says it's not a real museum object. So the point here is that you're using the box cover or a short box to transport something that shouldn't be carried on its own. You can also, I don't think it's a very deep box, but you can also use cardboard or mat board. However, with the cart in the image, I have a sense that it is more of a get the box onto the cart and move it to another area of storage. And again, with these carts, this is not a very expensive model. If you are local to a library and maybe a library is upgrading what they may have for carts, or the library is open one day a week and you need to do some work on the day of the week when they are not open, perfect time to ask them if you can borrow the cart. Examining the objects, again, giving weight and support to a fragile textile or a small piece of paper. That piece of foam that was in the box gently lifts out and goes onto your padded work surface. And anything that is fragile and has a handle, such as a teacup or something that is wider up at the rim, it's safest to carry it in a box lid only a short distance or getting it onto a cart by way of having it standing upright as opposed to the reverse and standing on its rim. Next slide, please. And here are some of the resources that are shared on the handout that you'll receive. In the left corner, we see a copy of the cover of Managing Previously Unmanaged Collections. This was written by a colleague of mine in Germany. She was the collections manager for a very large collecting institution and has recently, as of the last couple of years, now moved into software development for museum collection management systems. She is in the process of writing a new edition to this book because this one I think might be 7 or 8 years old already. You can find it on Amazon. It's a Roman and Littlefield publication, so you can find it on their website. Sideline hint here, they often offer discounts to institutions, not necessarily for how much you spend, but on various books. So be sure to get on their mailing list so you have a heads up as to when those discounts are available. And also by transparency, I was the ghostwriter for that edition because German is her native language, and we wanted to make sure that the English translation was correct and that the book made sense. And I will be for the second. If some of you are starting out in a historical society or small museum that has really very little organization to it, you might want to make sure that a copy of Angela's book is on your bookshelf because she does talk about establishing those relationships in town with communities and with specialists who you can then go to and ask for advice because they already know that you exist. The Connecting to Collections Care and the Reorg and the Stash are both sites that are visually pleasurable. They will give you inspiration how to outfit any configuration of storage you may have. And again, they are sites that both Erica and I had pulled from. Next slide, please. Okay, so Michele had talked about snakes, and I'm going to talk a little bit about weights. With the resource handout is a handout of instructions for making your own weights to weigh down paper that maybe has been rolled, keep something safe on a slippery surface, or just keep something in place. On the left, you have a snake tube being filled with lead shot. You can also use copper BBs. Sometimes if you know someone who hunts and they hunt with a shotgun, they might have spare lead that they use to fill their own cartridges, or you can go to the local gunsmith or a local hardware store and see what you can find for a minimal price. Again, always share what you are and what your institution is and what you're looking to do. If none of you have ever seen, Michele did show, but another image of a snake that has been sewn and turned right side out but not filled is on the top of the upper right image. And on the bottom of that is a sock that has actually been filled. And again, the black squares at the bottom are just another way to show you of using different fabrics to make different sizes, to make custom sizes and shapes. I looked on Amazon today, and some of these are going in the neighborhood of $20 and $30 for a very small quantity. When all you have to do is go to consignment shops and thrift shops, gather all those fabrics Michele has shared with you, sewing machine, or have someone sew for you if you do not know how, and get your own weights made, because then you can have them available whenever you need them in all shapes, sizes, and actual pound weightage. Next slide, please. So this starts the run of slides I have from those particular resources such as Stash and Reorg. If you have a taxidermy collection, even just one piece in your collection, and you need to keep it dust-free and clean, here's a perfect way to do it. PVC piping and Tyvek, and just building a little shed. Next slide. And this is a farm historical society that found a clever way to mount their awkward, large, what do we do with, how do we show tools and implements on a sidewall so they A, are out of the way, B, are safe, and C, are visible. Next slide, please. Some more examples of really clever techniques of how to maximize the space you have in storage, MacGyver style. On the left, we have a wire rack that has been turned into the sidewall of a moving wire rack. You can see the legs at the bottom. And onto this have been hung the framed portraits and the framed needlework of this particular collection. Using this particular method, you need to make sure that the hardware you have on the back is appropriate and that it has been changed out in case the wires are old and fragile, or they're eye hooks that are too small to carry the weight of those pieces to be hung for too long a period of time. And you want to make sure you have the right height, thickness, and size of the S hooks that you're going to use on that wire rack. Top center, we see a very large work on paper that's been mounted onto a wooden platform. How else are you going to be able to store this if you don't have appropriate space? So use the airspace above your shelving units. And this shows that perfectly set up on supports, which are attached to members with between the metal cabinets that are seen at the bottom there, but also allow for space to still be available to store things onto the metal cabinets. But you obviously know the pieces there, it's safe and it's visible. The bottom center just goes on more to show about hanging textiles. And Erica had a great image that she also got from, I think it was Stash, showing the mounting of textiles onto a wire screen, which is visible here. There's a beautiful flat file case in the back. But again, airspace, unless you're going to have someone struggle to put a second unit up there, and then you have to have a ladder to be able to access those drawers, put up some type of rod if textiles are something you need to hang, and those textiles can go up there in anticipation of being boxed or covered in muslin coverings, whatever the situation might be, but it's a temporary way to have them hanging, clean, out of the way, and still visible. And my favorite image is here on the right, and this is from a historical society that had attic space that was made to be climate controlled. That is, it wasn't very hot in the summer and it wasn't very cold in the winter. They used every space available. So you see in the incline of the roof, they have attached wooden pegboards, and onto those wooden pegboards, they have fashioned hooks and tape, cotton tool tape, to attach their umbrella collection and their cane collection. Out of the way, visible, protected. Next slide, please. Some more images of how you can take care of those odd things in your collection, especially if you're a historical society and especially if you're attached to some type of agricultural community. You'll always have people coming in and giving you things. Hopefully they share what they are, but then you have to figure out where to store it. And if you can make a relationship with a local builder or local builders, the local lumberyard, hardware store, anyone who is pretty handy with their hands, explain to them what you have and what you need, they can become pretty creative in what they can build for you. So as you see on the left, it's just a matter of 2 verticals and then wooden hooks that hold pieces in. Of course, to design that, you have to sort of know what you're going to be storing. In the center, you have a freestanding wooden unit that has books within the shelves, and on the ends, places for antique boards, important pieces of wood. Maybe some of those are metal, saw blades, whatever the situation may be. They're safe, they're protected. And on the right, it's the MacGyver look of using metal shelving units, which today are so plentiful, and putting all of those tools and implements, again, which are awkward, into a safe and visible place. Next slide, please. And here we have still some more images of using things that are everyday available and in today's world, pretty inexpensive, if not free. You have a small coin collection. You don't have a safe. Well, you can use these plastic sleeves to safely store them in the cardboard until you can deal with them at a later point, and you can store them into filing cabinet drawers. Again, visible, safe, and out of the way, safely stored. You can find these metal storage box units also at, say, for example, recycled office supply stores, sometimes on the side of the road, sometimes at your transfer station, sometimes at hardware stores, they might be upgrading or looking to change a look. You outfit the drawers with foam, and you can put smaller pieces in there that might take up space otherwise, but everything small in your collection is housed in those drawers. And on the right-hand side, we have some plastic corrugated board boxes that were custom built and outfitted on the inside for the smaller objects. And again, I believe it was Michele talking about labeling the boxes so that you're not moving contents too frequently. This one has images of everything in there in the order in which they are in the box. So you can just open up the box and go right to what you need. Next slide, please. And here we have an old tabletop that someone converted to a dolly by just adding on casters. When you add on the casters, you want to have a sense of what the maximum you might put as a load onto that dolly, because those casters are sold by weight capacity. So you can get the larger ones and think that you're not going to exceed that. It might be a smarter way to go, but for fair warning, casters are quite expensive. And sometimes you can find them at secondhand stores, at old hardware stores, sometimes at your local transfer station. Someone may have just decided to clean out their shop and they're just getting rid of things. On the right-hand side, we see a handmade dolly that was built for this particular piece of equipment. And again, on casters. So the beauty of that is that it can be moved out of the way when storage is in use and back in because there's no other place to safely put it. Next slide, please. And Erica and Michele have both talked about places to source things. Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace are wonderful places. Getting the word out to your community is also another wonderful way, because then that engages them with you and they have a stake in what you're doing. So Michele had talked about hollow core doors. I love to buy reclaimed doors, especially when they have a particular style and distinction to them, and often use them as portable work tables when I go on projects, because I can't always depend on something being there. And I don't necessarily have a folding table that might be conducive to the size of the space I need. So reclaimed door, sawhorses, one pair put together can make a portable or temporary or longer term desk or table. With the sawhorses, if you go into Home Depot today, one pair may cost you $50 to $60 because of the price of the metal that has gone up. But you can often find them by the side of the road, which I have been lucky enough to do in the last few years. Next slide, please. Again, with chain link fencing, you can make your own prop for hanging framed works. You can find it again on Craigslist, Facebook, your local transfer station, perhaps the local or maybe area metal redemption place might have some that they haven't yet put into the redemption machines. You can buy them by the single sections, and you can buy them sometimes already put together. So you have a corner unit there on the right, and that just might be applicable to something that you're doing in storage. Next slide, please. Sonotubes, another one of my favorite things. For those of you in the audience who might not know what a sonotube is, it is actually a structurally strong paper tube that has been built to withstand the pressure of having concrete poured into it to make foundational supports for buildings and other uses. So they come in a variety of diameters, a variety of thicknesses, and a variety of lengths. If you were to go to box stores such as Home Depot, you would only get the typical lengths that are available. In order to get something longer and wider and thicker in wall depth, you need to go to a lumber mill. And sometimes you have to look around to see who has what. And I'm going to show you in the next slide something that I needed to do for international shipping. But the beauty of these is, again, you can get them online. You can wrap them with a barrier of some type of poly or Tyvek. You can put your heavy textiles, so say a brocaded bedcloth that might be a king size. Erica did show a slide of acid-free tubes, but if you don't have the particular size or you don't want to spend the money to buy the acid-free, fit this out with a barrier and you can use it in the same fashion to roll heavy brocaded fabrics or bed covers or rugs over the tube, cover it again with muslin or some other type of barrier, and then use the hook system, which we've shown you in several different slides. So they are wonderful items. They are a little bit difficult to cut, so you might need someone at the lumber mill to cut it for you if you need it for a particular length. Next slide, please. Okay, so here is my creative twist on using sonotubes. Last summer, for an artist I was working with, I needed to send 32 oil paintings. He's a contemporary modern artist, so you can imagine the size of them. 32 of them to a gallery in Germany. So they were all rolled around an interior, thinner, smaller in diameter sonotube that I had to go and purchase from a lumber mill. Each sonotube cost me $75 to $80, and then cutting it was free. And I needed two different sizes. I needed the smaller one for the interior, and I needed a larger one once I built out the roll of paintings and coverings. So each painting was rolled up with poly, and another one was onto that, another one was onto that, and then the whole mess was again rolled in poly, and then the whole mess was outfitted with a little bit of bubble wrap so that it was secure within the outer sonotube. And here in the lower right, you'll see my friend David, who is an antique house carpenter, built me these wooden caps, and they are square. They are larger than the diameter of the sonotube, and they have rounded edges. And these were built to keep the tube from rolling. The gallery insisted on using FedEx, and anyone else who would have transported might have been okay with the roll, but I outfitted this to also make it easier for those who were going to be moving it to actually move it. And it also keeps the sonotube elevated off the tabletop. One other thing I'd like to point out in this image on the lower right is what I refer to as a spider table. And you'll see that under the table covering and the sonotube. And this is a table that actually folds out like an accordion and then folds back in. You can get them of varying sizes. The first one I ever bought was out of Home Depot, and it came with its own bag, and I think it cost me probably $50, $60, but I knew I was going to have it for many years. I have since found them at Goodwill and Salvation Army for $10, $12 without bags, but they're great to have because I can put them in my vehicle, and when I go on site on a job, I know I have a base of a table, and then sometimes I can manage to figure out what I'm going to use for a tabletop if I have not already brought that. And the studio space that my artist had rented, he's a Canadian American, and this was in an old mill up in an attic, accessible only by 32 stairs because there was no elevator going to that floor. I outfitted the entire thing by thrift store and transfer station implements, the chairs, the lamps, everything, because I knew when he moved his collection back to Canada, I was no longer going to need the space. And I certainly didn't want to have all of this extra stuff I had spent money on coming back home with me. So another great idea is transfer stations, everywhere you can go to get things at a minimal cost. Next slide, please. And then my last slide I wanted to share with you, again, Michele had talked about mattress pads and finding them in white and finding them at thrift stores. If you need something in a really, really short period of time and you don't have anything accessible, you can buy moving pads at U-Haul. Sometimes they will have them used. You can buy them at Home Depot. You can buy them at Staples. Then places such as Ocean State Job Lot have portable folding tables that come with handles, and they fold down relatively easily and are compact. You outfit that with the padding. And then in the upper right, if none of you are familiar with bed risers, they're a wonderful invention made typically for the dorm room for students to have space to shove their things underneath the bed. But I have several sets of these. So when the CCCA does the antique shows, I can raise the table so that, as Michele mentioned, we are not bending over and people coming to visit us aren't bending over. And I use them in almost any exhibition space that I am either setting up for someone or setting up for myself. And in the bottom image, you'll see a table already outfitted with padding, but it doesn't have risers. So you can kind of get an idea of how high a certain table might be in a given situation. But if you have your hands on risers, which again, I bought all of mine in Salvation Army and Goodwill for maybe $2-3 for a set of 4. If you have those on hand, you'll always have work tables at a height that's more conducive to you. Of course, you can have someone build them for you as well if you can't find them. And I think, Erica, that is the last slide. Yes, there we go. So we're going to turn things back to Eileen. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Darlene, Erica, and Michele. So we are over time by a bit. So I'll sort of move through comments and questions that are already in the chat. I would say if you have something that you need answered right away, happy to do so, but we can also certainly save comments, questions, and more discussion for a conversation with colleagues next Thursday the 4th at 12. So that'll be another great opportunity. So don't think if we didn't get a question answered today that you can join us next week or contact us. Just a quick couple notes about what was already in the chat. On Erica's note about copy paper, there was a note just to check your paper sometimes, and they do make indicator pens, so you can check whether something is acid-free or not, which is fantastic. For the wire metal shelving, and this is something I actually just saw myself for the first time last week, is they now make tracks for the floor for the metal wire shelving that you could put them on and kind of make your own pseudo movable shelving compact storage area. So that's another great way to get something for a lot less than a full compact shelving system would be. We do have one question from Paige. She said she's been working on carving out a reading room space in their archive classroom. And one of the walls they want to make is wire shelving unit, which is a mobile, to double as storage for research materials being used, but haven't been able to find any ready-made backing for wire shelves. Any suggestions for a pre-made solution for a backing or creating what is essentially, I believe, Paige, a wall for the wire shelves? I don't know, Erica or Darlene, if you've got anything on that, or anyone else, feel free to make a comment in the chat.
Was there a comment as to what is being stored on the wire shelves? For how stiff structurally that wall needs to be?
Boxes, says Paige.
Boxes. So I would say something like chloroplast or some veneer of wood, unless you needed to see through it for some reason. But I think if you find anything that is stable enough to hold the box from moving too far back, if that's the purpose you want the wall, then that could be an easy fix and an inexpensive fix. And perhaps one of the things that is underlying in all of the things we talked about is to, again, make sure that you're building those communities and those networks, because you don't know what your next town over historical society or your sister museum in the same town might have for extra supplies. So always be very vocal about what you might need.
Great. Yes, and Sarah also said in the comments chloroplast. So I think that that's the probably the answer folks are looking for.
Yeah.
Donia, when we were talking about Erica's trash can humidification, was also talking about how old towels work in place of blotter paper, and that with that and Michele's comment about mattress pads and sheets, that hotels would also give you old white sheets for free, and I would assume towels. So again, as Darlene's talking about these, scrounging, we might call it, but I think it's more community engagement with your work. Is a great way to find some of these materials for even less than going to your household store. And again, just the questions that we will be sharing these slides and the handouts with the recording. And I think that that's, other than some wonderful comments about how much everyone has appreciated this webinar. Yep, DeForest talked about getting tubes from a carpet store for free. There you go. Love it. All right. And the note section from the Canadian Conservation Institute. Wonderful. So thank you everybody for joining us. So again, please, love to see you again next Thursday at noon Eastern time for a conversation with colleagues. We could talk more fun tidbits and uses of different materials and ways to MacGyver our collections together. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.